An article posted to the main news source, Venlil Prime Times, under the Opinions section, 2136, December 1st, Voluntary Slavery. This is a warning and a plea given as professionals. Due to the arrival of the humans, legal protections need to be put in place to protect the sanctity of sapient rights. It is the signatories of this open letter's opinion that limitations on the usage of biological advantages need to be put in place, with the same penalties as fraud and other similar misconduct. While the full data that sparked this letter will soon be published in the Mind and Matter journal, we are publishing this preliminary letter public in order to speed up these proceedings, due to the seriousness of potential harm and the awareness required of this problem context. 4 months ago, the second race of predators, known as humans, made themselves known to the Venlil people. While this in of itself will spark countless further studies, our role is to ensure that there are no additional legal complications that may arise from the integration of a new species. Previous examples of such laws include increased restrictions on yotel farming tendency to use predatory pets when not monitored, increased fraud enforcement of NEVOC-owned businesses' Venlil empathy making them more susceptible to standard NEVOC business practices, or the requirement for full body coverings to be used by the Harchin in certain professions. Their color changing has a mild hypnotic effect on the Selayan. Our role was to assess the impact of humans on Federation species and vice versa. While the vast majority of the results were within normal limits, one area of assessment was the furthest out of normal bounds on record, to the extent that we are concerned of an effective voluntary servitude situation. Many of you will be assuming we are referring to the predators enslaving Federation species, when in reality the worry is regarding the opposite. Humans will require protections from their maternal instincts, at which point we attempted something very silly. Would humans carry our volunteers if asked? This actually increased the success rate 99%. Even when we went back to going in the opposite direction to the human test subject's original path, we still ended with a higher success rate, 87%. The reaction suggested that the humans considered this to be a positive interaction. The act of carrying our volunteers, even though they were effectively being used as free physical labor. Even after being explained the purpose of the test, many of them wished to continue carrying the volunteers. In the end, we stopped measuring based on success rate and started measuring based on distance traveled, with the average distance traveled before the humans stopped being between 0.5 1.5 miles. Each test stopped either because the human worked out that being told just a little further was weird, or the physicality of carrying someone. It is worth noting that this physicality means we couldn't test this final level on certain species, especially after the Mazic volunteer accidentally injured a human, requiring minor medical attention. The longest distance was 6.7 miles, where a doser was being carried. This test was only stopped due to the team getting ethically concerned with how far this was going. It should be noted that we often had to pay for a place for the human test subject to sleep, as the sheer amount of time spent with our volunteers caused them to miss their refugee camp curfews. A side note, the rumors of humans being persistence hunters is clearly accurate, as their general endurance is insane. Test 3. Monetary gain. The final test was simply to see how much monetary financial damage a human would put themselves through if simply asked. Volunteers were told to act as if they didn't have enough money for a local food item, then ask the human subject for the difference. We initially started the test at 5 credits, resulting in a mostly positive success rate, 59%. As expected, the desire to provide actual monetary recompense was far lower than the other 2 tests, although still far higher than acceptable levels. Even increasing the credit amount to 10 51%, 20 42%, and 50 27% came with far higher levels of success than acceptable. We did not increase the credit amount to find where humans would stop offering aid, as ethically each of us became uncomfortable with over a fourth of humans being willing to provide a not insubstantial sum of 50 credits just because they found the volunteers cute. It should be noted that all credits spent were paid back by the study. Notable statistics. While every species in general harbored positive interactions from the humans, 6 species in total had a non-average reaction. The Dausur were the most successful species by some margin, pop 115%. We believe that due to their small size and furry demeanor, the Dausur triggers the human's maternal protective instincts to the greatest degree. On the opposite side, 4 species suffered a more than average negative response. Farsul, 5%, Colchian, 8%, Crocodile, 21%, and the tillfish, 51%. These species all played major roles in the battle for Earth, with the tillfish seemingly also triggering a fear response from many humans, something to be studied at a later date. It should be noted that these species still had far higher than acceptable success rates. For instance, one crocodile was carried nearly 4 miles, and a tillfish volunteer managed to get a human to sign up for the anti-predator death cult. When asked why they took the actions they did, positive responses focused on terms such as adorable, cute, looked like they needed help, and a general relief of a Federation member not acting scared of them. Negative responses were as one would expect, a worry for what they would be giving up, a limitation on time or effort required. A few of these responses were more anger-filled, describing the attack on Earth as a primary reason, or a wariness of a Federation member suddenly treating them without fear. However, in general, humans were more than happy to be taken advantage of, most of them refusing payment for their time until we stressed that legally we needed to pay them for their time. Many of them stated a wish to continue interacting with our volunteers in a similar fashion, even after being informed of the test. While this was not the goal of the tests, we also noted a severe reduction in anti-human views from our volunteers. Before the tests, most of the volunteers feared being eaten by humans, only taking the role due to the high monetary compensation we were providing. Anyone who has interacted with the humans can tell you that they find most Federation species adorable. But the extent to which this is the case even surpasses even the hormonal slurry of a new Zurillian parent. The tests. The tests were designed in order to analyze to what extent this maternal instinct could be exploited. Volunteers 78 were selected from a variety of different Federation species 14, with 5,781 tests being run over 5,781 humans selected at random from the public. All Federation volunteers were paid 10 times the standard rate due to the dangers of interacting with predators, and all human participants were paid the standard rate, in addition to any expenses. All volunteers were instructed to act friendly, enthusiastic, and animated. This matches the description of cute. They were also instructed to avoid words with negative connotations such as predator, meat-eating, or suggestions of a lack of empathy. Due to safety concerns, initially we did these tests in conjunction with the exterminators, but very quickly 14 ceased this action due to their interference. Limitations. The main limitations of this study mostly revolve around the volunteer base and the testable population. The number of volunteers 78 does not reach the normal standards required by normal specifications. 6 of the tested species had 3 or less members volunteering, with 3 having only 1. This means that we cannot rule out that the effect of certain species is not due to humanity's reaction to such stimulus, but simply because the random volunteers we were given are more charismatic than normal. In addition, the population of the humans is also a factor. Normally, we would have done this testing on Earth, however, current limitations stop us from doing so. This means we can only test against humans on Venlil Prime. These humans not only tend to lean towards militaristic roles in human society, but it is a self-selecting sample. People with a natural tendency to hate Federation species are going to be less likely to travel across the galaxy to live on Venlil Prime. However, even with these limitations, the size of the effect cannot be explained by these issues alone. Test 1. Information gathering. The first test was designed to see how easily a Federation member could gain information and support from a human. Like all 3 tests, we started off slow, initially attempting to gain just a name and an electronic Federation mailing address. Anyone who has spent time in any capital in the Federation will tell you that this is not an uncommon occurrence. From upcoming musicians to ordinary businesses, attempting to gather passerbys' information for economic purposes is not uncommon. However, once the results of this test came back so high, 94% of participants gave out their information willingly, we decided to modify the test to see how far we could go. Asking for support for a political party, 87%, petition 85%, anti-predator petition 64%, a predator death cult 100%, an anti-predator death cult 41%. Many of these came with commitments to turn up to meetings, 3 humans actually turning up at the specified time, even after being notified that this was an experiment. Going further, we were originally going to see how much personal information, especially information used for financial crimes, we could get out of humans. However, our singular test was so successful this was abandoned due to ethical concerns from the testing team. A dossier managed, after 20 minutes, to get out of a single human. Their name and birthday, their SSN, a human identifier similar to the Federation identification number, their bank details, details of any valuables at their shelter, the door codes for the shelter, what times they would be away from the shelter. The shelter in question was informed of this security breach. Test 2. This test was to see how much time and physical effort a human could be persuaded to give up. The initial test involved asking a human for help carrying a moderately heavy item in the same direction as they were traveling, feigning tiredness. After this test had been run to an exceptionally high success rate, 98%, we modified the parameters to have the test subject walk in the opposite direction to where they were going. This did seem to decrease the overall success rate, 81%, though this sacrifice of time and effort is still far higher than acceptable levels. Afterwards, most volunteers left with a mostly positive view of humans, many choosing to join the exchange program on their own time. A special note goes to our 2 Tillfish volunteers, who both seemed to get visibly upset at the reaction of humans towards them, compared with the reaction from the other species. Both of them would later join the exchange program. Conclusion. As the statistics show, humans are at high risk of being taken advantage of by the rest of the Federation species, a voluntary servitude due to their overactive maternal instincts. Frankly, there is a good chance humans would have surrendered Earth voluntarily if the fleet had been headed by the dossier, or even the Krakotl themselves if they had asked nicely. While this currently isn't an issue, due to most Federation members being terrified of the humans, laws need to be put in place immediately for when this is no longer the case, lest we condemn these silly pack-bonding predators to a voluntary slavery they would willingly walk themselves into. Signed, Vysen, Slanark, Telek, Estalim, Tevok, Savlan.